Fashion trends come and go, but occasionally a label emerges that has lasting value. Hi, I'm Jim Doty, and welcome to the Economic Journal. It's my privilege to welcome to the program today Robert and Marie Gray, the co-founders of St. John Knits International. Headquartered here in Orange County, St. John today has 10 different divisions and employs more than 5,000 people worldwide. St. John collections include sportswear, footwear, jewelry, and fragrances, but the company is best known for its revolutionary St. John Knits. Bob and Marie, it's a pleasure to have you on the show for what will be a two-part show here on the Economic Journal.
Thank you, Jim. We're happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And I just mentioned St. John Knits, which is known worldwide. I want to go back to the very initial inception of St. John Knits and how it all got started. Maybe, Marie, I'll ask you, because I think you were at the very, very beginning.
I was really trying to impress him, Jim. You know, we were about to be married, and I spent a great deal of money on my wardrobe, and of course I didn't want to divulge that information, so I was looking for ways to be creative and dress on a shoestring budget, which I thought would impress my new husband-to-be. And I didn't like sewing, knitting, I didn't like that either, but it was the easiest thing to do because I could take two knitting needles with me to work and sort of continue my projects, and that's how it all began.
Now, weren't you a model at the time?
Yes, I was.
You were a model, so you were modeling, so you had to have this extensive wardrobe. And Bob, did she pull one over your eyes there? You must have been impressed, huh?
Not really. She's a very talented lady, and she was a very successful model. And most fashion models, particularly in those days, also had tremendous input on the line. The designers listened to them as to what they should be manufacturing, the type of garments they should be making. So
she didn't quite pull the wool over your eyes, but when you saw this knitted dress, what did you think? Or outfit?
I thought it had potential, but our views varied on how we should market it. She wanted it to be a very exclusive, very high-priced garment, and my thinking was that we could make them in volume and have a much bigger business.
Who won that battle?
Oh, of course he won the battle.
Now, this is pre-marriage, right?
Yes, but you have to understand, it took me a long time to make the first one. Of course it had to be very high-priced, but he had a vision I didn't have.
Yeah.
The
so when you
vision.
started doing this, I mean, it wasn't your plan. These would be for you to wear. You weren't necessarily thinking of selling these?
Well, actually, I was thinking of selling them because my friends, the other models I worked with, kept saying, oh, you know, they're great. Make one for me. I want to buy one. So that's how the idea originally came to me.
I see.
And I thought if those snobby girls were interested in them, then surely there must be a market out there. And
she figured we could sell enough to have our honeymoon in Hawaii, and that was the purpose of selling those first few dresses.
And how did you? And you sold those to your friends, not through a retail outlet. Those first few.
The first few were sold to friends.
To friends initially. Now, what were you doing at the time, Bob?
I was a salesman.
You weren't a model.
I wasn't a model. I was a salesman.
You were a salesman selling what?
I've been in the apparel field for about 10 years, selling different types of garments, sportswear, women's sportswear.
So you had a good eye for.
I had an idea of what I was doing, and there was no doubt in my mind that we could be successful. But we took it. I took them to the first garments to a store that it's out of business since, but was the finest store in the country at that time, called Bullock's Wilshire.
You know it well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fine store.
Yeah, the building is still there in LA.
Still there.
It's now a law school, but it was a venerable company.
And a very tough account to sell. And I really figured, you know, they probably aren't going to buy them, but I was trying to satisfy Marie. I figured she was going to sell enough to her friends to have our trip to Hawaii taken care of. So I was trying to placate her and take the garments and show them to somebody else.
And these were people you knew from your other accounts?
I knew from the other lines I was representing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me what it was like. You had or did you?
I had two dresses.
Two dresses. And you brought it to the person?
I brought it to a girl.
Buyer.
She's still around. Her name was Chris Alati. And I showed them to her, and she looked at them and took out a pad and said, "What's the name of the firm?" And I said, "St. John Knits."
No kidding. How did that come to you? Were you thinking
like
about
a flash out of the blue?
No kidding.
Yeah, I really. I mean, it's logical. It was Marie's maiden name.
Yeah.
But I got a little bit divine inspiration, I guess, and called it St. John Knits, and it stuck for a lot of years.
So you said St. John Knits. Did she take out the checkbook right there?
She took out the order pad and bought 48 dresses.
48 dresses.
Oh my gosh!
Now, when you say you were knitting these things, I mean with knitting needles or what?
The originals were done with knitting needles, circular knitting needles, and they took me a long time to make. Yes. Well, I chose a fat yarn because that took less time.
So these were puffier than the St. John knits that we know so well now.
Actually, they were the first ones were all done on what would be considered today a 5-gauge, and in fashion things come around, and the last couple of years that look of the bulkier things came around again.
It was in style. That's funny. That's funny. By the way, for the maybe 1% of the people out there that don't know what a St. John's knit is, you are now wearing a beautiful version of a St. John knit.
Thank you.
Which I assume is a little different from what it looked like back. What year would that have been?
1962.
1962,
yes.
When those first were being made. Do you know if any of those initial lines are still around at all?
Every once in a while, a customer will come in and say, I've got an old St. John, because they know
the puffier one?
The puffier ones, and they know that we've been known to trade them a new one for the old one to put in our archives.
Yeah.
And so they will come back.
So you have a couple of them in your archives?
We have a few. I actually did recreate one for
the retrospective.
For the 25th retrospective we had at South Coast.
But you didn't take out that round knitting needle thing. I mean,
no, but it was close.
It was
close. It was the first ones that were actually produced for the market and were made on the machines. I made it pretty much the way the first one was.
Was it? That's great. Well, okay, 50. You added this order for 50. You tell me.
That was a 2 years.
A 2 year supply
order, for a 2 year order.
So you go back to Marie and you say, listen.
No, I wasn't. I was hot.
He wasn't done yet.
I went to another friend who I saw. He had stores. They're still around, Country Club Fashions. A man named Herb Fink. And Herb bought 60. So now I'd sold 4 years production.
He came back. He was so excited. He had all these orders, and I just sat down and cried. I
can imagine.
She literally did.
Yeah. So what
because I thought
do?
he was going to ruin my career as a model because to run the machine. I was bulking up one side, and I was getting muscles on the one side, and I couldn't envision knitting all these dresses. I was devastated. But he said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything," and he did.
So what did you do? How did you take care of everything, Bob?
We found one knitter who knew how to operate the knitting machine.
And this is a machine.
This
is
a
round
machine.
Needle or something.
No, not. It was what they call a flatbed machine. In fact, this was a double bed machine. It had bed on both sides, and you could knit a dress. What would it take to knit a dress in those days? Maybe an hour and a half. They were very simple dresses, and we still have pictures of them with Marie modeling them, which we use on our promotional vehicles. And we've got the young man who knitted, and he turned out to be a very good knitter. And from him, we added another one.
Was this in Los Angeles at the time?
This was in the San Fernando Valley.
San Fernando Valley.
And we had 2 ladies working for us who were both related to us, their mother and my mother.
You went out and bought a factory or leased a factory?
We went out and leased the space. We started in the garage, but from there we went to a small store on Victory Boulevard, and rented space in that store and sold dresses out the front and manufactured them in the back.
There must be something common for those people we've had on the Economic Journal where there are 2-part shows. There have been very few. In fact, only one other one, and that was with John Crean. It's funny that he also started Fleetwood Enterprises in the garage.
Did he really?
So maybe there's something common for these incredible success stories. That's something for everybody out there. Start your business in the garage. Right?
The rent is right.
And because I guess you didn't have venture capital companies back then.
Did not have venture. In fact, we started off about $5,000 in the hole.
Yeah. So you had a little savings that you put into this, and thankfully you had the garage operation for a while, and then went out into a factory. And then I assume the division of labor in all this was you were marketing it and selling these. So you would go from account to account and get more and more orders, and as this happened, you would hire more and more of these knitters and production
correct.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you able to stay in the modeling business?
Not too long after that, because designing clothes was very new to me, and of course took me longer than it does today.
Yeah.
And I just had to devote my time, because I was also teaching the women how to crochet and how to put these knitted pieces together. And often I pressed.
And she was
Robert knitted
she was our
belts.
first presser, and probably the best presser, and is still the best presser in the company.
No, so you were like head of production.
She was.
Oh,
You
yes.
were head of production
One
and design.
time she was production.
And designer, were all these the same exact design as these initial ones that you sold at Bullocks
Yeah.
Wilshire? Same design, but you would pick the colors and things like that, right?
Well, they were the same
or was it
design.
one color? This was like a 4. Was this like the model?
I think the first one there was only one color.
Yeah, was it?
No, I thought we had several colors.
Did we?
We had white, we had coral, we had that turquoisey blue.
Oh, that was later, not the first time.
But anyway, so you had 1 or 2 colors, and eventually you expanded your product line. But initially, it was just the one design. Two designs.
Two designs, but then after the first order was delivered, you wanted new designs, and we had to come up with some new things.
So you would go to the head of production, and the head of production would say, "You're crazy. I can't do this," and no, we can do it.
She still says that today. We can't design any more styles.
It's true. It's true. I've really said almost every season, I can't do this again.
Yeah, we're going to take a break now, but we're at the very early stages of this incredible
Yes.
entrepreneurial effort. So I can't wait to hear the later years and genesis of what has become a great world-renowned company that we now claim as our own here in Orange County. So we'll take a break now and return soon.
Very good.
I have the pleasure and privilege of having a conversation with Robert and Marie Gray, the founders of St. John Knits International, a great company. We were just getting into the beginnings of that company. You had a great product. Bob, you took it out and sold that product. What do you recall what it was like? Was the expansion just steady, or were there quantum leaps in the growth of the company?
To start with, the growth was obviously very small and very slow, and the limiting factor was primarily production. We didn't, at that time, we knitted everything by hand on hand knitting machines. So we had literally hundreds of hand knitters by the time we got to the size we are today.
When you say hand knitting machines, the hand and machine seems like it's a contradiction in terms, but how does that work?
It's a flatbed machine about this wide, with needles all the way across, and you thread the machine, and then you run the head back and forth across the machine, and it knits.
So it can't do this by itself. You have to be putting in the thread, and
you have to run the shuttle back and forth.
So it's a very very labor-intensive process.
Now today, of course, we have all power machines, and they are driven by computers as opposed to people.
Well, you didn't have computers back then, so
No, we sure didn't.
How did you? I guess expansion was buying more of these machines and hiring more people.
That's exactly right.
So you did that, and started to add not only volume but different product lines as well.
No, we stayed pretty much with the product line we had, and expanded the number of styles we made in one season.
Tell me, as an economist and someone who has seen the effects of competition, here you had a great product, you're selling well. Why is it that in those early stages, when it didn't require a whole lot of capital, really, I mean, you talk about $5,000 in a garage and hiring people and a machine, why didn't someone else say, hey, look at these interesting dresses, why can't they do it? I mean, why didn't a competitor come along and when the only dress I can really, or apparel that I can recognize when I'm out that a woman is wearing, there's a St. John Knits. What is it that's so unique about what you're doing, and that you didn't have competitors coming along the line and starting to copy what you did?
We did have competitors. They just weren't as good as we were, and they didn't have this young lady sitting next to me to design the product. And the thing that I think has kept us, and I've said this for years, kept us at the forefront, and as you said, you could recognize the St. John consistency of design. Marie has probably 6, 7 assistants now, all good designers, but they're all under her supervision.
Yeah.
And she keeps them focused on the St. John look.
And to make that clear, Marie, you are now vice chairman and head of design. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So tell us, what does that mean, head of design?
Oh, it means a lot of work. It means staying abreast of what's going on in the world of fashion and keeping in touch with the lifestyles of our customers. So when we design a collection, I really want to know where she's going and what she's doing so that we can focus on that and give her a product that that she'll be excited to have in her wardrobe and that she has use for.
Now, my wife, when I give her a holiday present, I know the one gift that will always be received with a glowing smile and glimmering eyes will be to see not only a St. John knit apparel of some kind, but also St. John jewelry, St. John footwear, the whole ensemble. Are you designer for all of those product lines, sportswear and all?
I had the team of designers that work on the different product lines. Sometimes I'm very involved in actual designing different pieces. Sometimes I just edit their work.
But then, okay, let's going back to the founding of the company, early 60s, you're just doing apparel for how long before you started branching out into different areas?
10 years.
10 years?
Yeah, 10 to 15 years. We gradually, at the end of about 10 years, and today we're basically a vertical operation, which means that we do everything ourselves.
Really unique in apparel. Everything is outsourced generally. You'll have someone like yourself where you have a design person, but then you outsource the production and even the marketing and so on.
That's correct.
And you're vertical. We do
everything in-house.
And that's how it was at the beginning, and you followed through.
Well, we bought yarn on the outside to start with.
Oh.
And we dyed yarn on the outside, but gradually as we became more successful and were shipping more product, we found that we were having more and more trouble getting the quality that we wanted. Consequently, we started to look to do things in-house, and the first thing we did was to dye the yarn, then to twist the yarn, and gradually to the stage where we make the buttons, enamel the buttons.
You know, what you're just saying there explains to me why St. John Knits is so identifiable and why competitors will have a hard time trying to replicate that. They realize that, not only is there the design and your expertise and creative talent as a part of it, but in addition to that, this vertical integration is very difficult to compete. It's very difficult to just take one element of that and produce a product that has the kind of quality, because you're at it from the I didn't realize that the yarn actually, you're like the Standard Oil of apparel.
Well, Jim, if you look at what it would take today to create the manufacturing facilities that we have, as you say, we have 5,000 people.
Yeah.
The capital investment to compete with us is almost prohibitive.
But that's now. Back then, you have two designs, and these flatbed, is it what it's called? Flatbed. I'm learning here. Flatbed knitting machines, and why couldn't someone else do that?
They could.
Well, they could have, but
they did.
But you had to train the people. That was the big thing. The crocheters needed. You needed to find.
She's being too modest. She was a very talented designer, and Marie designed, as opposed to.
But you said two designs, Bob. You could copy those two. You didn't.
They could have copied.
I'm talking about initially.
But remember, in fashion, designs only last a very short period of time. Then you have to come up with something new.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was constantly doing
so it wasn't
new
two designs for 10 years.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
Dear
I was
me.
going to say, this is a rather unique niche in the apparel business that changes so quickly. So you were changing designs over those initial years.
And adding to the product line.
Yeah. And then you're saying 10 years later, that's when you started to expand to different kinds of apparel. Footwear and so on.
No, we were still just doing the knitwear, but we started going vertical 10 years later.
I see. So when you had to make sure that the quality was considered.
That's correct.
And so far over those first 10 years, you're in Los Angeles, and all the production is in
We're
Los
in the
Angeles.
San Fernando Valley.
San Fernando Valley. So you're talking about all production is there.
That's correct.
You weren't in Mexico or the
No.
Far East or anywhere else. Okay. So then, I would assume 70s. You're growing and growing. When did you become a public company?
In '89.
Now, to the public out there, just so they know, I mean, our viewing audience, going public basically means you own the business yourself, and then somewhere 1989, almost 20 years later, you realize you need more capital for expansion and so on, and more than the profits of the company and what you can do internally. So you go out to the public sector and you sell stock.
That is correct.
Ownership in your company.
That's correct.
And now all of a sudden you're listed on, what is it, NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange?
Listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
New York Stock, right from the beginning?
Yes, we
Wow,
came public on the New York Stock
impressive.
Exchange.
So you get New York Stock Exchange, you get an infusion of capital, but now you have public ownership and public accountability and all of that. And that was about 1989. What can you tell me, that infusion of capital that occurred at that time, what did that make possible that you couldn't do privately?
We were able to buy out. We had sold the company to a German company called Escada. And
Sure,
we
yeah.
sold 80% of the company to them. And they got in financial difficulties and needed to raise some capital. So they came to me and said, you know, we're going to have to sell the company. And I was very happy with them as partners. And Wolfgang said, well, you can take it public. And so we took the company public.
Okay, well then I missed that part of it. When did you sell out to Escada?
We sold out to Escada in probably 95.
You sold
85, I'm sorry, 85.
You sold to you were private, and then you sold it to Escada.
That's correct.
And you kept a private ownership percentage.
That's correct.
And you're happy partners, and then Escada gets into financial difficulty and says, "Listen, if we have to divest of
Ourselves.
you," and now all of a sudden, how do you buy it from them?
How do we buy it back from them?
And you get public owners.
Go public.
I see. Okay. And so that's where the money, it wasn't used necessarily for expansion purposes at the time.
No, we were always able to finance our expansion internally.
Uh-huh. So then you're a public company, and that's now late 89, and so early 1990s, and you're a public company. What was it like all of a sudden now going from initially a sole proprietorship or partnership to a partnership and then to a public company? All of a sudden, quarterly reports.
I'll let Bob answer
quarterly
that.
reports. I could go through the whole litany that
So
is
we really
involved.
didn't have to do that much different. We ran it pretty much like a
Did
public
ya?
company.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't have people looking over our shoulder.
You didn't have a
as
board
you
of
would.
directors.
We had a board, but it was
Advisory.
Marie and I.
Yeah.
But
But then you had your 10 Qs and all that
we
kind
had
of stuff.
all of those reporting structures,
Yeah.
which were our financial people did that, and they got used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the conference calls, as I'm sure you're familiar with the analysts, and we moved along very nicely until we had a little hiccup there in 93?
Oh, we were the darling of Wall Street for
Yeah, it was in 98 we hit
Quite a while.
the hiccup.
And you're still, from 89 to 98, you're a public company, and then you have a hiccup.
That's correct.
We're gonna end this first chapter of the St. John Knits International story now, but when we come back, we'll start with that hiccup and find out how you dealt with it, because I know it's an interesting story, because it means going from public ownership back to private. And I want to explore that with you in more detail next time around.
Very good.
Thanks for being on this chapter of the Economic Journal.
We enjoyed it. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.